Watch right now on the Front News Project. Putin threatens the world with nuclear Burevestniks and Poseidons. Ukraine is ready to respond to Moscow. Get ready. From Pokrovsk and Kupyansk, exclusive Frontline coverage. You have to see this. Fiery, intense, and blazing footage from the front lines. Watch right now.
Hello, this is Volodymyr Tymoshenko with you, and we're starting right away with the main topic. Yes, the Russians have concentrated about 11,000 soldiers to encircle the Pokrovsk agglomeration. Some of the occupiers want to advance to the north and northwest of the city, but Ukrainian defenders are holding their positions. This was reported by the 7th Airborne Assault Corps. What is happening in Pokrovsk now? A special TSN correspondent will tell and show you more details. Yulia Kirienko.
Tier, if you have a coil. Thank you, God.
This is how Russian drones hunt even civilian cars in the Donetsk region. This is the entrance to Kostiantynivka, once a city of thousands, now just scorched earth. On the highway, a car is still burning, hit by an enemy drone, and another car speeds past it. The soldiers are rushing to their positions and have just entered the city when another drone flies at them.
Wait, maybe they need help. They're alive.
A little further from the frontline cities, the roads are draped with long corridors of netting. Now, almost all the roads in Donbas look like this. Every day, these tunnels get longer and longer. In some places, the occupiers have increased the number of drones for the 10th time. They attack moving vehicles, search for the positions of our equipment, and set up ambushes right on the roads, even against infantry. They force people to leave their homes and disrupt logistics for our troops, cutting off all routes between the frontline trenches and the rear. In the forest belt hidden among the trees, paratroopers are concealing an American APC. I'm inside an American Striker APC. The guys from the 82nd Brigade consider this vehicle the coolest they've ever worked with. It's all because of its strong armor and maneuverability. This vehicle saved dozens of people in the Kursk region. It was this one that broke into the counterattack near Dobropilya. Back then, when the Russians hadn't yet managed to bring in so many of their strike drones. This vehicle repeatedly carried infantry into assaults, and it was always successful.
We were advancing in a convoy, got hit, and then drones targeted us. An anti-tank guided missile hit us, punctured 4 wheels, but out of 8, we drove away on 4.
It can carry up to 6 soldiers and safely deliver them to the drop-off point.
A 12.7 caliber machine gun, very precise. The armor is very, very good. It's excellently protected.
The powerful chassis allows it to handle any off-road conditions of war.
The vehicle is maneuverable, fast, and good.
But this vehicle has already been here for a month. It's just hiding in the bushes because with the current invasion of Russian drones, which are now present on the Dobropilya-Pokrovsk direction, its use is really only for a single time.
As of today,
the enemy does not allow us to use this equipment. That's why we're forced to do it on quad bikes and buggies.
Or even cover dozens of kilometers on foot, like in this video here, which was published by the 25th Airborne Brigade. These are our pilots who, after a firefight in Pokrovsk, are trying to pull out a wounded comrade and are moving under constant fire. If near Dobropilya, our defense forces are having some success, and they even liberated the village of Suketske, but in Pokrovsk, the occupiers have brought in significant reinforcements. And Russian infantry have already been spotted deep within residential neighborhoods in the southwest near the railway. Our drones recorded the tricolor flag over the remains of Pokrovsk. Eventually it was shot down, but this means that the road to Myrnohrad is now at risk of being blocked, and there is an entire cluster of defense forces there. It is becoming increasingly difficult for our infantry to hold their positions in the trenches near the village of Lysivka. A similar situation is unfolding in the village of Novoekonomikne, which is near Myrnohrad. Supplying food and ammunition to our soldiers, even with drones, is already bordering on the impossible, say the defense forces. And they are looking for ways how to unblock their own.
Meanwhile, nuclear threats are once again coming from the Kremlin. In response to the most severe sanctions from the US, Putin is brandishing his nuclear Burevestniks and Poseidons while simultaneously conducting drills. And by the way, the ALCO president of the Russian Federation, Medvedev, called Poseidon a doomsday weapon and at the same time threatened Belgium with a nuclear strike. But is that very Burevestnik really as terrifying and effective as Putin and his cronies make it out to be? Experts say that there are already a lot of questions piling up about the new Wunderwaffe of the bunker dweller. What exactly are they? We'll show you now.
The Kremlin has once again boasted about its super weapon, another one with no analogs for intimidation and propaganda.
There's not enough gasoline, factories are burning, the country is running out of money. It's a complete mess and so on, yet they keep trying to test some kind of super weapon, their next so-called Wunderwaffe. This time,
they brought out the nuclear missile Burevestnik into the spotlight, and Putin did it personally. He said that supposedly they had tested this nuclear cruise missile. Naturally, it was a success.
After all, it's a unique product that no one else in the world has. Moreover, I remember very well when we announced that we were developing such a weapon.
Back then, at that time in my life, even the most respected, top-level and highly qualified specialists, individuals who had spent many years developing their expertise and earning recognition in their fields, told me, after giving it careful and thoughtful consideration, that yes, it is indeed a good and worthy goal, but in the foreseeable historical future, it's unachievable. And now, here are the decisive tests completed.
The Burevestnik tests themselves supposedly took place on October 21st, reported Gerasimov. The results were meant to inspire fear.
During the missile's flight, all assigned vertical and horizontal maneuvers were carried out, thereby demonstrating its high capability to bypass missile defense and air defense systems.
How many thousand kilometers?
14,000.
14,000. And it stayed in the air?
Well, about 15 hours. And that's not the limit.
Obviously, this is how the terrorist state is responding to the sanctions imposed by the United States. And it would sound threatening if not for one nuance. It's the Russians themselves who should be afraid. The Burevestnik is by no means a new missile. Its development began in Russia back in 2001. However, it was only in 2018 that Putin publicly announced it. At that time, he claimed that the Burevestnik's range was unlimited and its flight path could be unpredictable. It would be worth clarifying what the consequences of its launch are. After all, it's not for nothing. In the US, the Burevestnik was nicknamed the Flying Chernobyl.
The missile is dangerous because if its reactor is destroyed, if it is shot down, or if it crashes or has an accident, a large area will be contaminated. A fairly large area, in fact. And no sane person wants that. That's why the Americans abandoned this environmentally unfriendly project back then.
The Kremlin doesn't care about the consequences, so the development continued and eventually a disaster did happen.
remember there was an explosion in Nyonoksa, some kind of nuclear, unclear, not exactly nuclear, but some strange explosion, after which radiation levels in Severodvinsk suddenly spiked. They say that their Burevestnik missile exploded.
This incident happened in 2019. It was then that the tests ended in a radioactive disaster. Employees of Rosatom and the Ministry of Defense were killed. However, this is by no means the first such case for sure. Nor will it be the last time that nuclear missile tests go far off plan. Just recently, in September of last year, another so-called unparalleled missile had a similar incident. The Sarmat exploded during launch in its silo. Satellite images at the time showed severe damage to the launch complex at the silo site. A huge crater. Returning to the Burevestnik, up until now, there have been reports of 13 missile tests. Of those, only one is considered successful. On that occasion, the missile flew 35 kilometers and the longest Burevestnik flight lasted only 2 minutes. That was precisely when it covered those same 35 kilometers. At the same time, the Kremlin, of course, never missed a chance to boast about successful tests without any evidence. Putin himself claimed a successful Burevestnik flight, and in October of 2023, all of this, of course, was accompanied solely by words.
And even if we assume, I'm not going to get into any special details or anything like that right now, that they actually managed to do it, even if we suppose they succeeded with a single unit, maybe two, it's something like the Oreshnik, which hardly anyone has actually seen yet, right? So even if they managed to make just one such missile, what's the point of it?
Trump reacted instantly to the announcement about the Burevestnik exercises and was not impressed by the nuclear club. On the contrary, he reminded everyone that there is a nuclear submarine off the Russian coast. And he called on Putin to focus on ending the war he started against Ukraine, rather than on missile tests.
I don't think what Putin is saying is appropriate. He should put an end to the war, a war that was supposed to last 1 week but is now in its 4th year. That's what he should be doing instead of testing missiles.
But the Kremlin has no plans to stop its nuclear games. On the contrary, they're even threatening that the missile will soon be adopted by the Russian army. Putin has ordered preparations for this missile. It is expected that this could happen in 2 years, that is in 2027. But is there actually anything to deploy?
And now let's move to the Kupyansk direction of the front. The enemy is becoming more ferocious here as well. In the Kupyansk direction, Ukrainian soldiers have repelled 4 attacks by the occupiers and 3 more clashes are still ongoing. At the same time, the enemy is trying to break through in the areas of Stepova, Novoselki, and towards Pishchanovo and Petropavlivka. Furthermore, Ukraine does not recommend that journalists trust the so-called permission from the Russian dictator Putin to visit Pokrovsk and Kupyansk. Moscow has already broken its own promises during the fighting for Ilovaisk. And now our journalists have prepared an objective picture of what is happening in Kupyansk at this very moment, especially for you. Let's watch.
The battles for control over the city of Kupyansk, a major transportation hub in the Kharkiv region, are ongoing.
The situation in Kupyansk remains difficult, but these days there is more control on our side. We continue to defend our positions.
Against this backdrop, Russian propaganda has once again released another batch of fake news. The bunker dweller claimed that Ukrainian troops in Kupyansk are not surrounded or blocked. In
the city of Kupyansk and the city of Krasnoarmysk, the enemy has ended up blocked and surrounded. By the way, I discussed this issue with the commanders of the respective groups. They do not mind, Andrei Ivanovich, they truly do not mind. If representatives of the media, including both foreign journalists and Ukrainian journalists, are permitted to enter the enemy's encircled zones so that they can go in and see with their own eyes exactly what is happening there and observe for themselves the actual condition of the Ukrainian troops who are surrounded. This would allow the political leadership of Ukraine to make the most appropriate and well-informed decisions regarding the fate and well-being of its citizens and its servicemen.
But these statements have nothing to do with reality. This is the painfully familiar old Kremlin tactic. Media blackmail and an attempt to demoralize Ukrainian society.
As of today, I believe the situation has been stabilized. I hope that our security and defense forces will be able to do everything to ensure that Kupyansk is not captured by the enemy. In
reality, this is not an encirclement, but rather heavy local fighting.
The main direction of the occupiers' attack is not Kupyansk itself, but Kupiansk-Vuzlovyi. The occupiers' plans include the possibility of establishing control over this key railway station.
As of October 30th, Ukrainian forces maintain control over most of Kupyansk and key transportation hubs. Russian occupiers have entrenched themselves in small groups on the northern outskirts of the city and in the western part, creating a foothold for further attempts at an offensive.
In other words, they are trying to change their tactics and strategy of combat operations in urban environments. It is fundamentally different from the tactics employed in Bakhmut, notably 2.5 years ago, when the occupiers employed a large amount of armored vehicles and accordingly the so-called local assault tactics to establish control over this settlement.
The main threat remains the northern directions and the enemy's attempts to break through to the highway, Kharkiv, Kupiansk-Svatove. This route is vital for supplying Ukrainian units on the eastern bank of the Oskil. From the south and east, Russian forces have been unable to approach the city. The main supply route for the Ukrainian armed forces remains through the Kupyansk-Vuzlovyi railway station and the embankment dam across the Oskil. The dam is periodically targeted by enemy airstrikes, but it remains operational and pontoon crossings serve as backup routes.
In other words, the main goal and strategic objective of the occupiers is not to advance deeper into Kharkiv region, but rather to repeat the scenario of 2022, when the Izium grouping of the occupiers was considered one of the most combat capable and aimed to achieve the operational encirclement of Ukrainian units, specifically in the area of the Slovyansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration. This is the main objective. That is, the strategic task of the occupiers is to establish full control over the territory of Donetsk region.
But the enemy has run into the tough defense of the Ukrainian armed forces. Counterattacks by Ukrainian troops are holding back the Russian advance.
At the moment, Ukraine's defense forces are conducting counter-sabotage operations to prevent the penetration of Russian occupiers further into the urban area and to prevent them from gaining direct control over the key hub of Kupyansk.
Kupyansk is not just another point on the map. It is a symbol of resilience, endurance, and military stamina. The Russian army is trying to wear the city down, but the Ukrainian defense is holding strong. And no matter how much the Kremlin tries to pass wishful thinking off as reality, the truth is on the side of those who are defending their home. And step by step, they are driving the enemy out of Ukrainian land.
Well then, now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Kramatorsk and Konstantinovka fronts. The bloody rampage of the enemy army continues. And here, on the Kramatorsk front, the aggressor tried once to advance towards Tupochki and was stopped by our soldiers. On the Konstantinovka front, the enemy carried out 12 assault actions in the areas of Shcherbinovka, Petrovka, Yablonovka and Rusiny Yar. One battle is still ongoing. At the same time, enemy aircraft struck Konstantinovka. And now here's another crucial topic. Ukraine's partners have begun to actively help us improve our air defense system. To protect Ukrainian skies from the barbaric shelling by the Russians, new weaponry is already on its way from the United Kingdom and Germany. You'll find out exactly what kind and in what quantities in a moment.
Russia is ramping up its strikes on Ukraine's energy system and changing its attack tactics. Moscow is launching hundreds of drones capable of bypassing air defense systems and equipped with cameras for improved targeting.
Russia has turned its strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure into a systematic operation aimed not just at temporarily damaging the networks, but at destroying the viability of large areas of the country. On the eve of winter, the goal of these attacks is to deprive regions of heat and electricity, undermine industry, provoke mass emigration, and create political pressure on Kyiv, writes The Economist. In
these conditions, air defense becomes critically important. But this year, Western partners are acting proactively, strengthening Ukraine's skies and energy system before the cold sets in.
We are not just now starting to prepare for this winter period. We began preparations back at the end of the previous winter season.
As early as November, the UK will begin serial production of Ukrainian Octopus air defense drones, a joint project between Kyiv and London designed for the rapid protection of the skies from enemy drones and missiles.
Our Ukrainian friends will share their technologies and intellectual property with the UK, and in turn, we will further develop them and produce them on a large scale so that we can deliver to Ukraine every month. Thousands of interceptor drones, said El Karnes, the UK's Minister for the Armed Forces in Parliament.
These drones will become part of a system called the Air Shield. It will combine Western air defense systems such as Patriot, Iris-T, NASAMS, as well as new mobile installations, which Germany and other allies are providing to Ukraine before the start of winter. The first drones will be tested by Ukrainian military personnel. If the tests are successful, production will be expanded, and some of the drones will likely be manufactured directly in Ukraine. At the same time, the UK authorities are expanding their multi-purpose missile production program. It is planned to deliver 5,000 units of this weapon to Ukraine to strengthen air defense.
We are also announcing an increase in the production program in the UK to provide Ukraine with 5,000 new multi-purpose missiles. This makes it possible to create new jobs in Belfast and other cities, as well as strengthen Ukraine's air defense for the coming winter.
At the same time, European allies are increasing their support for Ukraine's energy sector. Germany and other NATO countries are mobilizing resources, from air defense missiles to support for the energy sector, so that Ukraine can withstand the winter and resist attacks on critical infrastructure.
Germany has already paid 390 million euros and another 30 million. We agreed on this in the summer, but today I want to announce that we will invest an additional 30 million. Thus, we are providing 450 million euros. These funds will make it possible to acquire the necessary technical equipment to save Ukraine.
In addition, EU countries are preparing a winter support package. To the already provided 3 billion euros, a new guarantee of 800 million has been added for the emergency purchase of gas. This was reported by the EU ambassador to Ukraine, Katarina Matanova. The aid covers repairs to power grids as well as the supply of generators and transformers.
We have also provided and continue to provide a lot of assistance in the energy sector. Not only with generators for people and businesses, but also with transformer and compressor stations to help restore power grids, gas distribution networks, and compressors that supply gas from storage facilities that have been distributed. We also provide financial support to state-owned enterprises and major energy companies for the repair of their equipment. We are also supplying more than 2 gigawatts of electricity per day.
Thus, support for Ukraine this winter is reaching a new level, from modern air defense systems to reliable energy supply. And whatever the Kremlin may be planning, Ukraine, together with its allies, is aiming not just for tactical success, but for strategic success, to withstand the cold, to preserve strength, and to maintain the ability to defend itself.
And now let's move to the Alexandrovsk direction of the front. Here too, the so-called Russian world continues to destroy, kill, and maim. In the Alexandrovsk direction, the enemy tried to break through the defenses of our defenders. In the areas of the settlements of Zeleny Gai, Verbovoye, Stepovoye, Novogrigorovka, and Novovasilievskoye, the defense forces repelled 6 enemy attacks and 3 more clashes are still ongoing. Yes, Ukraine, as you have already seen today, is successfully destroying targets important to the occupiers' army every day, both deep within Russian territory and on temporarily occupied Ukrainian lands. Such strikes are constantly increasing, and we will tell you what kind of weaponry makes this possible. And most importantly, what will make these attacks even more effective in the near future.
Distances of hundreds or even thousands of kilometers are no obstacle for Ukrainian weaponry. Russian oil refineries,
well, that's obvious. The refineries are screwed. That's clear even without saying it.
key facilities of the military-industrial complex and the Russian war machine.
This is just a nightmare. Damn, things are getting intense.
And recently, in response to the ongoing shelling of Ukraine's civilian infrastructure, Ukrainian forces have started targeting critical infrastructure in Russia as well.
No way, fuck, no way. Seriously, I can't believe this. Oh my god.
Barish, look.
Where are we going? What a ride this is. No way, fuck.
When the Kremlin threatens blackouts for Ukrainians, Russians should also prepare for a cold and harsh winter.
If they threaten blackouts, for example, in the capital of Ukraine, the Kremlin should realize that a blackout will also come to the Russian capital.
For a long time, Western allies restricted Ukraine's ability to strike deep into Russian territory. As a result, Ukraine has built up its own long-range arsenal. According to the head of Ukrainian intelligence, Kirill Budanov, today 99% of strikes on Russian oil refineries are carried out with Ukrainian weapons.
Back when all this started, when people said we were fighting with one hand tied behind our back, I tend to agree with your view that this is the right interpretation of what was happening then. But now we have our own production, and it is precisely our domestic production that has given us the ability to use our forces and resources the way we see fit.
The Kremlin understands only the language of force. The best argument in any negotiations with Moscow is a powerful Ukrainian army and defense industry. In particular, our own production of long-range drones and missiles, with which Ukraine regularly strikes targets in Russia located thousands of kilometers or more from the front line.
In order to somehow bring this war to a stalemate, to shift it, we need to learn not only to repel enemy attacks on the front line, but also to suppress their logistics and aviation. That's why it became necessary, and I'm not even mentioning the need to strike at military-industrial complex facilities, at Russia's energy system. This is Belgorod. Basically, there's no electricity here, nowhere in Belgorod at all.
If the simplest drones to manufacture are used for strikes on Russian oil refineries, jet-powered drones are better suited for military-industrial complex targets, like the Polyanitia, Peklo, and Bars types. Their technical specifications are not disclosed. Experts suggest that the range of these jet-powered drones is between 500 and 700 kilometers. The main advantage is their low cost compared to cruise missile competitors.
Cities like Moscow and Leningrad, which are the most protected by the Russian Federation's air defense systems, could start getting hit every evening. The bar can reach those distances, and I believe this should happen systematically.
For dessert, the occupiers are in for Ukrainian long-range missiles, the long-range Neptunes and Flamingo, with ranges of 1,000 and 3,000 kilometers respectively. The Ukrainian Pink Bird, in addition to its enormous range, impresses with a warhead weighing about 1,000 kilograms.
Usually the warhead of a modern cruise missile is 450, but at most 500 kilograms. As a rule, almost all missiles have a 450 kilogram warhead. What does a 1-ton warhead provide? When it hits a target, for example, an industrial facility, 2 such missiles will completely disable it for at least a year. That is, there will be a single crater about 20 meters in diameter.
Russian terrorists who are shelling Ukrainian cities must understand a mirrored strike will definitely come.
Well then, let's analyze the situation on the Lyman front. Putin's army is acting true to form here as well. On the Lyman front, the aggressor carried out 5 attacks on the positions of Ukrainian units near Novovodyanove, Zarekny, and toward the settlement of Korovye Yar. 2 combat clashes are still ongoing. And here is another important aspect. Against the backdrop of the Kremlin dictator's loud statements about so-called nuclear Poseidons and Burevestniks, Donald Trump, the President of the United States has moved to action. The American leader has instructed the Pentagon to resume nuclear weapons testing. More details on this topic and what is happening directly on the battlefields coming up in our military review.
Ukraine is once again in the occupiers' crosshairs. The Russians carried out a massive attack with missiles and drones. The level of tension is rising at the front as well. The most difficult situation remains in the Pokrovsk direction, where the intensity of combat is high. A large number of occupiers are concentrated there. The Russians are trying to gain a foothold by any means necessary.
The main tactic of Russian small assault groups is to attempt to create an operational encirclement of Ukrainian defense forces directly in Pokrovsk itself. At the moment, the actual line of contact is defined by key position. These are the defense points of the Ukrainian Defense Forces, the so-called CTD. Despite the extremely difficult situation, the Ukrainian Defense Forces are carrying out successful counteroffensive actions. And as of now, the area under the control of the Ukrainian Defense Forces has increased to 200 square kilometers.
Fierce fighting continues in the Kupyansk-Kharkiv region. The occupiers are trying to gain a foothold in the northern part of the city. However, there is no talk of any encirclement of Ukrainian troops. The situation in Minohrad and its surroundings is also fully controlled by the Ukrainian armed forces.
At the moment, the main efforts of the occupiers are not aimed at blocking the Ukrainian Defense Forces, not directly in Kupyansk, but rather on the possibility of a breakthrough to the Kupyansk railway junction. The occupiers need control over this key railway station in order to use the short logistics route from the territory of the Russian Federation and from the territory of the occupied areas of Luhansk region to form a strike group whose goal would be to advance along the Oskil River towards Slovyansk, towards the Kramatorsk agglomeration.
Meanwhile, Putin came out with a new scare tactic. The bunker dweller keeps talking about the successful tests of Russia's wonder weapon.
These are the Poseidon unmanned underwater vehicles designed for specialized underwater operations. They also have a nuclear power unit. For the very first time, we were able to successfully not only launch it from the underwater carrier using the starting engine, but also to activate the nuclear power unit.
However, Putin did not reveal any evidence, tests, locations, routes, duration, or other details.
Not according to the rules, not according to the rules. Petrol, not launched into serial production, not put on combat duty. Therefore, there is not the slightest reason to talk about any threat from these mythological Russian wonder weapons to NATO or directly to the United States.
But despite this, the Buz President Medvedev called Poseidon a doomsday weapon and at the same time threatened Belgium with a nuclear strike. Let us recall, the Belgian Minister of Defense stated that if Russia strikes the country's capital, NATO member states will level Moscow to the ground.
This is nothing more than an information provocation to which Western allies have stopped reacting. And the reaction of the Russian Federation's ambassador to Belgium to the statement by that country's defense minister is quite telling, as it demonstrates complete confusion and unpreparedness for such a tough statement from the other side, from one of the members of the NATO bloc.
Against the backdrop of the Kremlin dictator's loud statements, Donald Trump has moved on to action. The American president has instructed the Pentagon to resume nuclear weapons testing.
On the nuclear weapons tests of the United States. This is a tough military response from the country and President Trump to such information attacks from the Russian Federation. Moreover, Trump stated very firmly that the United States possesses the world's leading nuclear capability. Russia is in second place and China is conditionally third.
At the same time, the US has begun a large-scale reduction of its military presence in Eastern Europe.
On the one hand, while announcing such plans during the rotation period, let me emphasize again, the United States is strengthening its nuclear presence in European countries. Let me emphasize again, this includes the redeployment of the nuclear arsenal to the United Kingdom, the redeployment of nuclear submarines, and the presence of an American aircraft carrier in territorial waters. Exactly. So all of this indicates, on the contrary, a strengthening of the US military presence near the immediate borders of the Russian Federation.
That's all for today, but very soon on Front News. New unique reports from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war obtained so that you know the truth. This was Vladimir Timoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.